Hey there, Joseph from Roboflow. Today, we're going to walk through how to use the Roboflow upload API so you can programmatically add images and annotations to your datasets. Using the upload API is essential for incorporating active learning into your projects. That means using data from your inference conditions, wherever your model is running out in the wild, is the best data for your model to improve. So if you can programmatically identify model failure or even random scenes from where your model is running and add those back to your data set for annotation, retraining, and redeployment, you'll have much better models. So let's talk through this. First things first, you'll actually need a data set for where the images that you're going to collect out in the wild are going to be uploaded. So here I've already actually created a project called just chess subsample. And you guessed it, I'm going to be working with chess images per usual. The other thing I want to call out is that you'll need your, let me make sure this is clearly in frame. You'll need your API key for your data set here to make this happen. So in settings, and I've actually already got my settings page up here. In settings, you'll see that I have the ability here to copy my private API key. You're going to need to copy that and don't share it externally. That API key is private to your workspace. And if anyone has this API key, they'd be able to add images to your workspace. So you want to keep that private to you and your account. Okay, so given we have a data set created where we're going to send the images to, the next question is, how do I actually send images there? Well, we'll use the upload API directly from the documentation. And so here, I'll just go no cheating. I'm going to delete everything I've already written here, and we'll do this live together. So in my Colab notebook here, I'm going to show you how to do this with Python and all the examples. You'll note that Jacob has already created a video, which I'll link to in the description and in our documentation, about how to use the upload API for the bash, for bash scripting. Let me show you where that is in the docs. So if I go to the upload API So yeah, Jacob walked through how to do this with shell scripts using bash previously. I'm going to show you how to do this with Python. So the way that we'll use the upload API is we'll call for an endpoint, api.roboflow.com. We'll need the dataset name, which goes in the URL, and then the upload parameter. And we send the URL, which needs to be required, and our API key, which I just showed you where to grab that. And then we'll pass in an image and optionally the name, the split, which is like train test split of where that image is going to be sent. So I'm actually going to skip ahead down here to where I actually have these uploading an image from local using Python. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that code snippet and then come right on back here to my notebook. So I'll paste that code snippet directly into my notebook, and we'll talk through this a little bit. So first things first, you'll notice that I import a few required libraries: requests, base64 for encoding the image, IO for working with the image, and pill for working with the image. We'll call for the image name, and we'll need the image name here. That's where we'll insert your image, which we'll do in a second. We'll convert it to RGB in case it's not already. We'll convert it with IO and then make sure that it's encoded in the proper format. We'll base64 encode that image as a string for uploading. We'll then construct the URL. So here's where we're actually using the URL that was described in the documentation. And you notice here, we're gonna have to replace the your dataset parameter with the dataset name. We'll have to replace our API key. We'll have to replace the image name. And then the rest of this will just kind of work, okay? So if I try to run this right now, it should fail, right? Yeah, error, no such file directory, yourimage.jpg. Now I've put in my Colab notebook some chess data. And so in this chess data, for example, I have a series of images and annotations. So this image here, I'll open it up so you can see, move myself. This image here is, whoa, this big chess image, this big chessboard with all the pieces on it. So we're gonna add that image programmatically to our data set. Now, I mentioned that we need to know the dataset name. So if we go back to our dataset, you can see here that our dataset, which is empty right now, does have a name. So app.roboflow.com/projects/chess subsample slash upload. So chess subsample here is my project name. And so I'm going to swap that into the your dataset parameter here. Your dataset or your project. The two are synonymous. Okay, chess subsample. So that part looks good. Now, of course, we also have to replace the image parameter. We have to decide which image we're going to upload. I'm just going to grab that first image. So I'm going to copy the path of that image. And here, you would just put in the path to your image from local. However, you have the where on your local machine or wherever you're doing your work is the path to your image. So here, mine's inside content, inside a folder called chess data, and then I have image 0156 JPEG .rf all this stuff .jpeg. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is so I've got the image name, I've got the project slash dataset name. I need to add in my API key. And before I recorded this video, I actually added my API key as a variable called my key. Now here, you would, of course, replace your API key, but I don't want to show you what my API key is, so I'm just going to programmatically construct that portion of the string. Okay, now I need to replace my image, which again is the image name from above, so I'll just paste in the image name from above. And all right, let's try running that. So here, I suppose we don't need to import requests every single time, but it is what it is. So here, we printed the response, and the response here says success, true, then it also gives us an ID for that image. We'll talk about why we need that ID in a moment, but let's go back to our data set and see. So if we go to our annotate tab, there it is. There's the image. Awesome. So this image is in the data set. Now that's great. We have the image, it's uploaded, and we did that programmatically. Now, what if we wanted to add an annotation associated with this image? Well, note that adding an annotation with an image depends on the annotation format that you have. By that I mean, some annotations have one annotation per image. Some annotations have one annotation file for a bunch of images. For example, Voc XML has one image per one annotation. Coco JSON has one JSON file for all of the images that you might have annotated. In my case here, I happen to have Voc XML. And so similarly, I actually just copy and pasted directly from the code snippets over here in the upload API. If I go down and scroll to add annotation, I copied this code and I did your annotation. I just copied the path to the annotation. I updated the data set. And then the last key thing here is this ABC123. Let's talk about what that is, okay? So if we go back to our code here, we're gonna import requests, which I guess we already have an import in this notebook, so that's non-essential, but for completeness, let's just follow the exact example. Our annotation name here. So note that, of course, we want the annotation associated with the image that we have annotated. So in this case, in the Voc XML format, the name of the annotation typically is the same name as the image, except it's a .xml file instead of .jpeg. And so the path here actually looks remarkably similar, with similar names all the way down to .xml when I copied that file path in there. And then, okay, so let's talk about this URL construction, because this is a little bit unique. So I do api.roboflow.com/dataset/chess subsample, that's the name of my project, right? /annotate, and then here, this ABC123 from the docs became this. What is this? That is the associated ID we would want for the image. So in this case, the ID for the image is actually up here. So I'd want to replace that. Why do we need an image ID? Because we need to match the image to the associated annotation. And the image ID tells Roboflow that image that we uploaded before is associated with blank annotation, so the two match neatly, right? Otherwise, Roboflow wouldn't know which annotation matches which image. So we could go ahead and run that, and that would add the annotation directly to our image that we already have uploaded. Note that that's a pro feature. for now, so you would need Pro to do that. Okay, now let's say that you have a folder of images, right? This is much more likely. Let's, well, I guess it depends on your context. But let's pretend like you have a folder of images that you want to upload with the upload API. So I've written some code here, and I'll walk you through it step by step. So let me comment out this, this portion here. So I am actually going to walk through a directory. So here, let me put my mouse, or let me add a little code cell. Let's make sure that I'm in the correct directory that I want to walk through and upload all these images. So in other words, we can do pwd to print the working directory. And that will tell me which directory I'm currently working in. Note that we'll want to be, see, I'm in content. I actually want to be inside chess data, because inside chess data is where I'm going to be iterating through file by file to add each of those files to the current portion where I'll add all the files in a given folder to a given data set. So I'm actually going to go one directory deeper here. So what am I doing at this point? Because when I add a group of images, I'm going to shuffle through a folder. And that folder I'm going to shuffle through, I want to make sure I'm in that folder as I do my shuffling. Right now, I'm one directory too high, so I'm going to go boop, one directory lower into chess data. So I'm going to cd into chess data, run that. Okay, and now if I do pwd, I should be inside chess data. So pwd. Okay, great. So, okay, why did I go through that trouble? Because notice what I'm going to do here is I'm going to import OS, which gives me the ability to interact with my, my operating system here. And for file name in os.list directory, which directory am I going to list? This is where I just have a period, which means list everything in the current directory that I'm in. This is why I was so obsessive to make sure I was in the chess data folder, because that's where all of my individual images are. So if file name ends with .jpeg or file name ends with .png, then I'm just going to print the file name at first just to show you all what's happening here. So let's run this little line of code. And what this should do here is it should print all the name of our JPEGs inside chess data. And in fact, that's exactly what we get. All the JPEGs print out, which means that code's working correctly. But in the context of our upload, we don't want to print out the JPEGs. We want to add them to Roboflow, add them to our data set, right? So I'm going to uncomment this code and talk through what I'm doing here. So on comment. So it's basically the same thing as above, except instead of explicitly stating a file, I'm just going to say, hey, I just want to use file name. So if I'm on that given file, I'm going to use that file name. And then down here, instead of using this specific image, name equals plus file name. Awesome. So now when I run this code, what's going to happen? Well, it's going to iterate through chess data, which you can actually see the folder here on the left. It's going to iterate through that, and then it's going to, for each file in there that ends in JPEG or PNG, and I have JPEGs and XML files, so it's going to grab only the JPEGs, convert them to the base64 encoding, and then upload them to my chess subsample dataset using my API key for that specific file, adding them all to the train set, and post them to the API. Now, I could run that, but I also want to show you the code for, just to wrap this all up, what if I want to do everything with the folder of images and annotations? So very, very similar to what above, where I am going to iterate through every file inside that directory, grab that image, and then upload that image. But remember, what that image is going to send back is an ID. So I'm going to grab the associated image ID. That image ID is what Roboflow sends back in the response. Remember, this response here. And I'm going to use that ID to pass to the upload annotation endpoint so that I can group together my images and my annotations. So remember that this is going to depend on the type of annotations you have. For VOC XML, generally the annotation name is the same name as the image, but with .xml. So I wrote this little bit of code here where the annotation file, notice, is going to be, I'm going to grab the file name, 0th indexed, which means everything before .jpeg, and then add .xml. Let me actually just run that bit of code independent of anything else here, so you can just see what I mean by this little line. It's kind of the clever part here. So with file name, actually I can even just run the file name to prove to you that we have, or maybe I won't have a file name because I didn't run the above code yet. It might be undefined still. Yeah, let's see. Okay, yeah, so we do have a defined file name. So with that file name, what this line of code does is it grabs that file name, splits everything before the .jpeg, and then adds .xml instead. So if I just remove this portion, you'll see what I mean. So this will index everything before the period. So it'll print everything before, which is just like the JPEG name above, except we're gonna add .xml. And this, again, for XML formats, ensures that my XML and my JPEG have the matching names so that I get the correct annotation for each of my images. If I were doing this with Cocoa annotations, I wouldn't have to change the annotation file name each time. I would only need one consistent Cocoa annotation for all of my images. But with VOC XML, there's a one-to-one image to annotation relationship. Anyway, so that's getting to make sure the image and annotation match one another. Then and then everything else from here is just like above, where we created the URL uploaded annotation. So I have my URL here with the dataset / project name as chest subsample / annotate. But notice, instead of saying one specific image ID, I'm going to use the image ID that I got back when I did my image upload. So I'm going to pass that here, which basically says associate that image we just uploaded with the annotation I'm about to send you. And so we're going to use our API key, and then we're going to send that annotation name. And that will send everything on up there in a nice little loop. Okay. Just for completeness here, let's go ahead and run my loop here where I have a bunch of images but not annotations. We'll pretend like we were in a situation where maybe we have like a security camera running that's looking for packages on our doorstep, and it's randomly grabbing one image every 2 minutes. So we have a bunch of these images that are coming in and going into a folder. So we want to add all those images, which haven't yet been annotated, we'll pretend, to our data set. So you can see here that image by image, I'm getting success true, and I'm getting an associated ID for each of those images. And these images are actually pretty large, as you saw when I opened one up, which is why it will take a little bit here. Of course, it just depends on the speed of my internet. So let's jump back over to my data set and see as this fills up. Look at that. So we're at 7 so far, 8, and bit by bit, these are being added automatically to my data set. So I'll refresh the page just so you can see them in the preview here as well. The counts update live, but the image thumbnails, the page needs to be refreshed. 12 images. I think I had 20 total. 20 or so. 14. Awesome. So yeah, this could just run in the background. While your model's running live, you could just randomly grab some image frames and send those back to your data set for a continued collection and improvement of your data. And that'll be a huge benefit. It means that you can focus on grabbing the most important images for the problem that you're solving. Some next steps might be grabbing images where the model fails. So let's pretend like you have a model running in production, and whenever confidence is below some threshold, let's say whenever confidence is below 20%, maybe that's the image you want to randomly sample, or I guess not so randomly. That's the image you want to sample and send back to your data set, in addition to randomly sampling. But you can see here this completed, and now I've got my 20, in this case, remember I uploaded without annotation, so I've got my 20 on annotated images directly in my data set uploaded programmatically. Like and subscribe to the Roboflow YouTube channel so that we know that you're enjoying content like this and we can make more of it. And feel free to comment if any questions or thoughts come up. I'll be sure to link this notebook in the comments below so that you can use this example as you build out your projects. We can't wait to see what you build. Be sure to reach out, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Until next time, thanks.